Welcome to the Nexus Social Hub Podcast. Welcome to the Nexus Social Hub Podcast.
Nexus Social Hub Podcast.
Picture this scenario, right? Because I think almost everyone has lived some version of it.
Oh, absolutely.
You've just gone through a genuinely terrible breakup, like the kind that just leaves you feeling completely hollowed out.
Right. You're just staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., completely miserable.
Exactly. So a few days later, you're walking down the street and it starts pouring rain. You duck into this random, unfamiliar coffee shop just to stay dry.
Just trying to get out of the weather.
Yeah. And you're standing there dripping wet, miserable, waiting for some latte you don't even really want. And the exact second you reach the counter, the speakers overhead start playing, the song.
Not just any song, but the specific track that feels like surgically precision engineered to describe your exact flavor of heartbreak in that exact millisecond.
Yes. The lyrics perfectly match a conversation you literally had yesterday. It is just uncanny.
It's spooky, yeah.
You stand there in your wet shoes, looking around at the barista, the other customers, the ceiling speakers, and you just cannot help but think, is the universe sending me a sign?
Right, like, did the cosmos cue this song up just for me?
Am I actually the main character in a movie right now?
It is a profoundly disorienting, but incredibly common human experience.
It really is.
You get this sudden, eerie suspicion that the external physical world is somehow reading your internal private diary.
Yeah, which is a wild feeling.
It is. And it forces a very uncomfortable question about what reality actually is.
And that question, figuring that out, is our entire mission for today's deep dive.
We are going to get to the bottom of it.
We're going to figure out if reality is actually talking to you. We're going to explore the fundamental nature of existence, how we construct the stories of our very lives, and whether the universe actually orchestrates these moments.
Or, and this is the big one, if your brain is just playing an incredibly elaborate trick on you.
Exactly. And to do this, we are pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources from 2026. This isn't just, one book.
No, it's a massive collection.
We have a full integrated academic curriculum on something called Lived Narratology, a framework on reality as correspondence, and some intense historical analyses of fundamental ontology.
You're talking ancient Greeks, early Buddhism, Descartes, all the way up to modern psychology, and, believe it or not, screenwriting theory.
Which I love. And what is brilliant about this 2026 curriculum is how it treats these philosophies. It doesn't treat them as dusty museum exhibits.
Right, it treats them as active, everyday tools.
Yeah, we aren't just going to throw jargon at you. We are going to use these texts to untangle the actual grammar of reality itself.
To show how these massive sweeping concepts directly dictate the way you navigate, say, a traffic jam or an argument with your partner, or that sudden spooky coincidence in the coffee shop.
But before we can figure out if reality is winking at you with a breakup song, we kind of have to establish what reality even is.
Which drops us straight into the deep end.
Right into ontology. And for anyone who hears that word and immediately feels like they're failing a college exam, let's ground it.
It's not as scary as it sounds.
I mean, biology tells us how cells divide, right? Physics tells us how gravity pulls a coffee cup to the floor. What is ontology doing that those sciences aren't?
It's asking a much stranger question. Ontology isn't looking at the furniture in the room. It's asking what it means for the room to exist in the first place.
Okay, so it's the study of being itself.
Exactly. Not just what exists, but what it actually means for something to be. Science assumes existence and measures it. Ontology questions the basic underlying conditions of existence.
So it is the ultimate zoom out. And looking at our historical analysis, human beings have basically been fighting this 2,000-year war over how to answer this.
It really boils down to a massive debate between two concepts: substance and process.
Let's start with substance, because I think this is how most of us naturally view the world. If reality is based on substance, the universe is essentially a giant bucket of Lego bricks.
That is a very Platonic way to look at it, yeah.
Think about it. A red 2x4 Lego brick is a red 2x4 Lego brick. It has a fixed, unchanging essence.
Right, its identity is locked in.
If I use it to build a toy spaceship, it is a red brick. If I take the spaceship apart and build a castle, it is still the exact same red brick.
It survives any context.
Yeah, it has a stable, independent identity that survives no matter what environment you put it in. And this was the view of Plato, Aristotle, and centuries later, Descartes.
They all believed the universe is made of fundamental, unchanging things.
But then you have the opposing camp, which looks at the Lego brick theory and says it is a complete illusion.
And this is process philosophy. Instead of a bucket of fixed bricks, they argue reality is more like a river.
Okay, a river.
Yeah, the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus is the pioneer here. He famously coined a concept of flux or pantare, which means everything flows.
Right, he argued that being is a continuous, never-ending process driven by contradictions.
His most famous quote is that you can never step into the same river twice.
And people often misunderstand why he said that, right?
Yeah, completely. It's not just that the water's moving, so the river is physically different. It is also that you are different. In the seconds it takes you to step in, your cells have died and regenerated. Your mood has shifted. Your body temperature has changed.
Oh, wow. So there is no fixed river and there is no fixed you.
Exactly. There is only the continuous process of interacting.
So the Lego brick analogy completely fails here because a human being isn't a fixed block of plastic.
We definitely aren't.
We think of ourselves as nouns, a person, a human, a biological entity. But biologically, our cells replace themselves entirely over a period of years.
Right. We are not a static object.
We're a very slow-moving wave passing through physical matter. We are a verb masquerading as a noun.
I love that phrasing. And this realization wasn't isolated to the Greeks. Halfway across the world, at roughly the same time, early Buddhist thinkers were building an entire, highly sophisticated framework around this exact rejection of substance.
Yes, specifically the Madhyamaka school formulated by Nagarjuna. They go incredibly hard on this.
They completely reject the idea that anything has a fixed, independent essence.
Right. They have a concept called pratitya samutpada,
Which translates to dependent origination.
meaning that absolutely everything that exists only arises in a network of mutual dependence. There is no Lego brick floating in a void.
And if you look closely at dependent origination, it leads to one of the most misunderstood concepts in Eastern philosophy, shunyata, or emptiness.
Yeah, when Westerners hear emptiness, they often think of a void or a black hole or just nihilism and nothingness.
Right, but in this context, it means things are empty of an independent, fixed essence.
Give me an example of how that works in practice. How is an object, empty?
Okay, take a wooden chair. If you look at it through the lens of substance, you say that is a chair. It has the essence of chairness.
Right, it's just a chair.
But if you look at it through dependent origination, you realize the chair only exists because of the wood, and the wood only exists because of a tree.
And the tree needs soil and water.
Exactly. The tree only exists because of the soil, the rain, the sunlight, and the carbon dioxide. And on top of that, the object only functions as a chair because human beings have a specific biological anatomy.
Oh, right. Because we have knees that bend at a certain angle and we get tired and need to sit.
Yeah, so if you take away the sun, the rain, the carpenter, and the human spine.
The chair just vanishes.
Exactly. It doesn't have an independent essence. It is just a temporary convergence of relationships. Reality is the network itself, not the nodes in the network.
This clash between substance and process has driven human thought for millennia. And the 2026 curriculum maps out how humanity has tried to resolve this by moving through 5 major historical paradigms.
It's a really helpful way to track it.
I want to trace how our brains have evolved to tackle reality because it really explains how we ended up where we are today.
So the first major attempt to lock down reality is the substantive or religious paradigm. Think of Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, or Descartes.
Okay.
In this worldview, reality absolutely is made of fixed substances, and those substances are created, defined, and maintained by a supreme being God.
So if reality is a bucket of Lego bricks, God is the manufacturer who decided exactly what shape the bricks are, and they will never change.
Correct. But as we move into the Enlightenment, thinkers start to find holes in that. Like, how does an immaterial soul interact with a physical body?
Right. If they are two completely different substances, how do they actually touch?
Yeah, and that brings us to the second paradigm, the monistic immanent answer, championed by Baruch Spinoza in the 17th century.
Spinoza is fascinating because his answer was so radical at the time that he was actually excommunicated from his religious community for it.
He really rocked the boat.
He essentially looked at the division between mind and matter, or God and the universe, and said, this division is fake, It is all one single thing.
He argued for a single cosmic web. God and nature are not creator and creation. They're the exact same entity.
So mind and matter aren't different substances.
No, they're just different attributes of the exact same ball. You know how a cylinder looks like a circle from the top, but a rectangle from the side? It's the same object, just perceived through different attributes. For Spinoza, your physical brain and your conscious thoughts are just two different angles of viewing the exact same reality.
But even that giant cosmic unity didn't hold up forever because, honestly, it still feels a bit abstract.
It doesn't help you much on a day-to-day basis.
Right. It doesn't account for what it actually feels like to wake up on a Tuesday with a horrible headache. And that brings us to the 20th century and the third paradigm, the existential phenomenological approach.
This is where philosophers like Martin Heidegger, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Maurice Merleau-Ponty step in. They realized that you cannot separate reality from the human being who is experiencing it.
Because we're the ones looking at it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can't just talk about the universe as some objective thing floating out there, because the only way we know about the universe is through our messy, biased, temporal human consciousness.
Sartre famously said, existence precedes essence, which completely flips that Lego brick theory on its head. You aren't born with a fixed human nature locked inside you. You are in a pre-programmed brick. First, you exist. You are just thrown into the world, into a physical body, into a specific time period, and you are forced to make choices.
And through those choices, you build your own essence.
And Heidegger emphasized this concept of thrownness, right?
Yeah, you didn't ask to be born, but here you are, hurled into a reality with a ticking clock marching toward death. For them, ontology isn't about categorizing objects. It's about the sheer panic and freedom of existing as a conscious being aware of its own mortality.
Which is heavy. Then we have the fourth paradigm, which kind of circles back to Heraclitus and Buddhism, but with a more modern edge, the differential or fluctuating paradigm.
This is thinkers like Friedrich Nietzsche and Gilles Deleuze.
They look at fixed identities and say, not only are substances an illusion, but holding on to them is actually holding us back.
Right. Reality is just a continuous play of forces, power, and relations. Everything is always becoming something else.
Which naturally leads to the fifth and final paradigm our sources identify, the hermeneutic or linguistic answer.
Philosophers like Ludwig Wittgenstein, Hans-Urs Gadamer, and Paul Ricoeur.
They point out a pretty fundamental limitation in all the previous paradigms. How are all these philosophers debating reality? They're using words.
Exactly. They were writing books. And the linguistic paradigm argues that you can never step outside of language to see pure reality.
Because you always have to describe it.
Right. Your entire understanding of being is fenced in by the vocabulary you possess, your historical context, and your interpretations. As Wittgenstein suggested, the limits of my language mean the limits of my world.
We're constantly playing language games.
And reality is just the meaning we negotiate through those games.
Okay, I have to stop you here because I love a good abstract philosophical debate as much as anyone.
I can feel a butt coming.
Yeah, I am going to push back pretty aggressively on this linguistic, fluctuating process view of the world because it sounds beautiful in a seminar room. But let's say I am carrying a 12-pound bowling ball and I drop it squarely on my big toe.
Ouch.
That bowling ball does not feel like a fluctuating network of dependent origination. It does not feel like a language game. It feels like a very dense, heavy, fixed substance, and it shatters the bone in my toe.
Fair point.
How does viewing that bowling ball as a web of relations help me when I am hopping around my living room screaming in physical agony? The physical world wins, doesn't it?
I'm so glad you brought up the bowling ball because it forces us to make a vital distinction that is at the heart of the 2026 curriculum. We have to separate empirical facts from ontological meaning.
But the empirical fact is the meaning. The fact is gravity, mass, and crushed nerve endings.
Oh, no. The empirical fact is the cause. The meaning is what happens next. The physical mass of the polyurethane sphere pulling at 9.8 meters per second squared and the pain receptors firing in your toe, those are empirical facts. They belong to physics and neurology. No phenomenologist, no linguistic philosopher denies gravity. They aren't saying the bowling ball is a hallucination.
Good, because the X-ray is going to show a broken bone.
Exactly. But how does that bowling ball exist within your human experience? That is the ontological question.
Okay, I'm tracking.
In the split second after it hits your toe, that bowling ball ceases to be just a sphere of polyurethane. It transforms. It exists as a violent interruption of your day.
Yeah.
It suddenly exists as a symbol of your clumsiness, sparking anger at yourself.
Oh, I see.
It alters your perception of time, right? The next 30 seconds of pain feel like 3 hours.
Yeah.
It might ruin your plans for the weekend, completely alter your social relationships.
So the physics explain the impact, but the ontology explains the suffering.
Yes, exactly. The meaning of the bowling ball, how it integrates into your lived reality, is entirely dependent on you being a conscious, temporal, vulnerable human being who, had plans for the afternoon.
Wow, yeah.
If you drop a bowling ball on a rock, there is an empirical impact, sure, but there's no ontological event. There's no suffering, no altered timeline, no frustration.
So the linguistic and phenomenological frameworks don't deny the physical world. They explain how the physical world gets translated into the human story.
That's exactly it.
That makes a lot of sense. The universe provides the raw data, but consciousness provides the translation.
Right.
But that brings us to a really uncomfortable realization. If reality is this incredibly complex mix of raw physical data, human perception, emotional translation, and language games, it is no wonder we are constantly fooled by it.
We're so easily tricked.
It's right. If our brains are doing all this heavy lifting just to understand a dropped bowling ball, how do we know our brains aren't just lying to us?
How do we escape the illusion? That is the question that has haunted philosophy from the very beginning.
And our sources highlight the two greatest, most influential matrix-breaking concepts in history to show how we try to find truth.
We are talking about Plato's allegory of the cave and René Descartes' method of radical doubt.
Let's start with Plato, going back to roughly 375 BC in Athens. The allegory of the cave is arguably the most famous metaphor in Western thought, and for good reason. It is vivid, it's terrifying, and it's brilliant.
It really holds up.
Plato says, imagine a group of prisoners who have been chained inside a dark underground cave since the day they were born. They are chained by their necks and their legs. They cannot turn their heads at all.
They're completely immobilized.
All they can do is stare straight ahead at a blank rock wall.
Now, behind these prisoners, higher up in the cave, there is a large fire burning. And between the fire and the chained prisoners, there is a raised walkway. People walk back and forth along this walkway, carrying objects on their heads, puppets, shapes of animals, trees, other humans.
And because the prisoners cannot look behind them, all they can see are the shadows of these puppets projected onto the wall by the firelight.
Right, that's their whole world.
And when the people carrying the puppets speak, the echoes bounce off the wall, so the prisoners assume the shadows are talking. For these prisoners, those shadows are not just a trick. They are the absolute, total sum of reality.
They name the shadows, they study them, they build a whole society around predicting how the shadows will move. In Greek, this realm of illusion and mere opinion is called doxa.
But the story hinges on what happens next. One day, one of the prisoners is freed. His chains are removed. He is forced to stand up, turn around, and look at the fire. And Plato is very clear about this. It is agonizing.
Right, it's not some magical happy awakening.
His muscles are cramped, his neck is stiff, and the light of the fire physically burns his eyes, which have only ever known total darkness.
He is blinded. Initially, the physical puppets look less real to him than the shadows he has always known. He wants to turn back to the wall where things make sense.
It's just too much.
But he's dragged up a steep, jagged ascent, completely out of the case and onto the surface of the earth. And here, the blinding light of the actual sun hits him. He is completely overwhelmed.
But slowly, painfully, his eyes begin to adjust. First, he can only look at the shadows on the ground. Then he can look at the reflections of trees in the water. Then he can look at the trees themselves, the stars at night, and finally, he can look directly at the sun.
And for Plato, the sun is the ultimate metaphor. It represents the idea of the good or the agathon.
The source of everything.
Yes, it is the source of all truth, the light that makes reality visible to the mind.
This upward journey is Plato's vision of education, or paideia. It is the journey from illusion to objective truth. But the allegory has a very dark ending.
It does. The enlightened philosopher realizes the truth and feels a moral duty to go back down into the cave to free his friends. But when he descends back into the darkness, his eyes are no longer accustomed to the gloom. He can't see the shadows clearly anymore.
He fumbles around. He looks like an idiot to the chained prisoners. He tries to tell them about the sun and the trees, and they think his journey upward has just ruined his mind.
And Plato writes that if the freed prisoner tried to unchain the others and drag them up toward the light, they would resist him so violently that they would kill him.
Which is not just a theoretical ending. Plato wrote this because that is exactly what the city of Athens did to his teacher, Socrates.
Exactly. Socrates tried to drag the youth of Athens out of their intellectual cave, and the state executed him for it.
So the takeaway from Plato is profound. Truth is out there. It is objective. It exists independently of human opinions. Escaping illusion means breaking away from societal habits, unchaining yourself from what the masses believe, and making a painful upward intellectual climb. The illusion is caused by society and our unexamined environment.
But if we fast forward almost 2,000 years to 1641, we meet a philosopher who completely flips that script.
Yeah.
René Descartes wants to break the matrix, just like Plato. But he doesn't look up and out into the cosmos. He looks in.
To understand Descartes, you really have to understand the historical context of 1641. The world is turning upside down. The scientific revolution is shattering old paradigms.
Galileo has proved the Earth revolves around the sun, defying the church and centuries of common sense.
Everything Descartes was taught in school is suddenly suspect. He realizes that the very foundation of human knowledge is rotting.
He is terrified that he might be basing his entire life on falsehoods. So he decides he needs a solid foundation, something he can know with absolute 100% mathematical certainty.
To find it, he locks himself in a stove-heated room and employs a method of radical doubt. He decides to deliberately throw out literally everything he believes to see if anything survives the purge.
And he executes this doubt in 3 escalating waves. The first wave targets the senses. Descartes notes that our senses routinely deceive us.
Right.
You look at a straight oar dipped in a lake, and the water refracts the light, making the oar look bent. Or you see a square tower from miles away, and it looks round.
So they aren't reliable.
Descartes argues, if my senses can lie to me even once, it is illogical to ever trust them completely. So throw out all sensory data. Everything you see, hear, or touch might be a hallucination. The physical world goes out the window.
That's wave 1, the physical world is gone. Wave 2, the dream argument. Descartes says, okay, I am sitting by the fire in my dressing gown. I feel the heat. Surely my own body is real. But then he realizes, how do you know right now as you're listening to this that you aren't dreaming?
You don't. Dreams feel incredibly real while you are inside them. You feel gravity, you see vibrant colors, you feel genuine terror. There are no definitive signs to distinguish waking life from sleep. So maybe your own body isn't even real. Maybe you are asleep in a bed somewhere, dreaming you have hands.
Throw out the physical body.
Now he is floating in a void without a body or a world, but he hits a wall. He thinks, okay, even in a dream, 2 + 2 = 4. A triangle still has 3 sides. A bachelor is still an unmarried man. Mathematics and pure logic seem true no matter what state I am in.
And this forces him to invent his third and most famous wave of radical doubt.
The evil demon, the genius malignus.
Yes. Descartes creates a thought experiment of ultimate paranoia. He says, what if God is not a loving creator, but an all-powerful, incredibly deceitful, evil demon whose entire existence is dedicated to tricking my mind?
What if this demon is directly manipulating my thoughts so that every single time I try to add 2 + 2, the demon manipulates my brain to think the answer is 4, but in some objective reality, the answer is actually 5?
What if a triangle actually has 4 sides, and I am just being eternally hypnotized? He has doubted away the world, his body, and now even math, geometry, and logic. The matrix is complete. He is trapped in an absolute void of uncertainty, wondering if anything is real at all.
And is a terrifying place to be.
Okay, I have always struggled with this part. Because if the evil demon is controlling all of Descartes' thoughts, wouldn't the demon also be controlling his realization that he is being tricked? How does Descartes possibly escape this loop? If the demon controls logic, he controls the logic Descartes is using to try and escape.
That is the exact trap Descartes sets for himself. But it is within that exact void, inside that inescapable loop, that he finds his unshakable foundation, the turning point of modern philosophy. He realizes, the demon can trick me about the sky, the demon can trick me about my body, the demon can trick me about math. But even if there is an evil demon deceiving me about absolutely everything, there must be an I that is being deceived.
Wait, because deception requires a target.
Precisely. In order to be tricked, you have to exist. In order to doubt, you must be thinking. And if you are thinking, you must exist as a thinking thing. You cannot doubt that you are doubting because the act of doubting proves you are doing it.
Cogito, ergo sum.
I think, therefore I am. The demon cannot trick you into thinking you exist if you don't exist.
Wow, that is brilliant. But look at the fascinating contrast this sets up for humanity. Plato warns us against naive realism, the idea that the world is exactly as it appears, by saying that society, culture, and our environment blind us.
Right.
For Plato, truth is objective, cosmic, and found by looking outward and upward. Descartes warns us against naive realism by saying our own physical bodies, our senses, and our assumptions blind us. For Descartes, truth is subjective and found by retreating entirely inward into our own isolated consciousness.
And if we step back and look at the bigger picture, this is the massive historical shift that birthed the modern world. Plato represents the ancient mind. Reality is out there, and you must conform your mind to it. Descartes represents the modern mind. Reality starts from within the subjective self.
He effectively trapped humanity inside our own heads.
Yes, making human consciousness the absolute center, the starting point of the universe.
Which perfectly explains why we act the way we do today. Because if you truly believe, even subconsciously, that your own mind is the starting point of reality, how do you navigate the physical world?
You construct it around yourself.
You structure your life like a movie script. You cast yourself as the protagonist. And that brings us to the next massive piece of the 2026 curriculum, Lived Narratology.
This curriculum is an incredible synthesis. It integrates the depth psychology of Carl Jung, the comparative mythology of Joseph Campbell, the phenomenological philosophy of Paul Ricoeur, and, surprisingly, the screenwriting principles of Hollywood guru Robert McKee.
Screenwriting and philosophy in the same class. I love it so much.
It works because the core premise is mind-bending. The curriculum argues that human life isn't just something we describe as a story after the fact, sitting around a campfire reflecting on the past.
We don't just recount it.
No. We actively, constantly organize our present experience through narrative structures. We do not experience raw reality. We experience expectations, conflicts, rising action, and plots. We are scripting our lives in real time.
Let's break down how this works mechanically, starting with Carl Jung and the symbolic drama of the psyche. If I'm the main character of my life, who exactly is the I?
Well, Jung says my identity is split into three main parts: the ego, the persona, and the shadow.
Okay, start with the ego.
The ego is essentially the current first-person narrator of your story. It is the center of your conscious awareness. It is who you think you are when you wake up in the morning. But to interact with society, to go to work, to go on a date, the ego needs a mask.
Right.
It needs a costume that fits the specific scene it is playing. That is the persona.
It's the socially acceptable role you play because you think the script requires it of you. You might be the dependable employee, the perfect parent, or the edgy, rebellious artist. The persona isn't necessarily a lie, but it is a flattened, simplified version of you.
The psychological danger occurs when the ego completely identifies with the persona. You forget it is just a mask you put on for a scene, and you start believing it is your actual face. You lose your depth.
And what happens to all the parts of your personality that don't fit the script? What happens to the traits you repress because they aren't dependable or perfect?
They get shoved into the basement. The shadow.
The shadow?
Yes. The shadow contains all the traits the ego refuses to acknowledge. It could be dark things like aggression, envy, or selfishness. But it can also be positive things like untamed creativity or vulnerability if your persona demands you be stoic and logical.
That makes sense.
And here is where lived narratology gets fascinating. Because you refuse to own these traits, you project them outward onto other people.
Give me a concrete example of how that projection works in everyday life.
Let's say your persona is the tireless, perfect worker. You repress your own exhaustion and your secret desire to just sit on the couch and do nothing. That desire goes into the shadow. Then you look at a coworker who leaves at 5 p.m. sharp and takes their full lunch break.
And you just hate them.
You feel this intense, irrational hatred for them. You cast them as the lazy villain in your work narrative. But you don't actually hate them. You are projecting your own repressed desire for rest onto them.
Oh, wow.
You literally cast other people as the antagonists in your life story, embodying the traits you hate in yourself. You turn an inner psychological conflict into actual external social drama.
We populate our movie with villains made of our own repressed feelings. That is wild. And speaking of populating the movie, we need to talk about Jungian archetypes, because the 2026 curriculum highlights a massive pop culture misconception here.
It's a huge misunderstanding.
When people hear archetype, they usually think of a literal character hard-coded into our DNA. Like there is an objective genetic image of a wise old wizard with a long white beard, or a literal mother image just sitting in a filing cabinet in the human brain waiting to be unlocked.
Exactly. And that is fundamentally wrong. Archetypes are not literal images inherited through genetics. You don't inherit a picture of Gandalf.
Yeah.
What you inherit are form-giving tendencies.
What does that mean, a form-giving tendency?
Think of it like biology. A bird doesn't have a picture of a nest in its brain.
Yeah.
But it has an instinctual disposition, a tendency to gather twigs and weave them into a bowl shape when it needs to lay eggs.
Okay.
Archetypes are psychological instincts. They are dispositions to organize human experience in recurring ways based on our shared evolutionary biology and culture.
So the archetype of the mother isn't a specific woman's face.
No, it is the universal human tendency to organize our experiences around themes of origin, unconditional care, containment, or even destructive, suffocating absorption. When you meet someone who cares for you deeply, your brain uses the mother archetype to structure that relationship, to make it recognizable. Archetypes provide the invisible scaffolding, the forms of our plots, not the specific details.
So we have these internal forms, we have our masks, we have our shadow villains. How do we string them together into a plot?
That brings us to Joseph Campbell.
And the monomyth, universally known as the hero's journey. Almost every blockbuster movie uses this template. Separation, initiation, return. Luke Skywalker leaves Tatooine, learns to use the Force through trials, and returns to blow up the Death Star, saving the galaxy.
A classic.
But we don't just use this for Star Wars. We use it to structure our own lives, right?
We do, constantly.
Yeah.
And we do it as a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
We use the hero's journey to make suffering bearable.
How so?
Imagine you suddenly lose your job or you go through a devastating divorce. Phenomenologically, that just feels like chaotic, meaningless, random pain. It is terrifying.
It is.
But if you mentally map the hero's journey onto it, suddenly it is not random pain. It is an initiation. It is the belly of the whale. It is a trial you have been given to overcome so you can gain wisdom and emerge stronger. The narrative structure translates chaos into meaning.
But the 2026 curriculum offers a massive, vital pushback on Campbell here, because treating every single hardship as a hero's journey can actually be incredibly toxic.
It really can be. The curriculum heavily critiques the monomyth because it falsely universalizes a very specific and often very privileged worldview. The hero's journey is highly conquest-oriented. It is about a single individual going out, dominating a problem, and winning.
And not all suffering can be conquered.
Exactly. If you apply the hero's journey to everything, you risk romanticizing trauma. Imagine telling someone who's suffering from generational, systemic poverty that they are just on a hero's quest and need to fight their way out.
That's horrible.
It is incredibly dismissive of structural reality. It also completely ignores stories of collective struggle, stories of quiet caregiving, or tragedies that just don't have a neat, redemptive return phase.
Some things just suck.
Right. Sometimes a chronic illness isn't a dragon to slay. It is just a reality to endure. Not every life is a quest, and insisting it must be, one can make people feel like they are failing at their own lives.
That is such a crucial point. We force reality into a 3-act structure, and when it doesn't fit, we blame ourselves.
We do.
Speaking of 3-act structures, this is where the curriculum brilliantly brings in Robert McKee. For those who aren't screenwriters, Robert McKee is a legendary Hollywood guru. He wrote the book Story, which teaches the technical grammar of writing movies. Why is a Hollywood writing coach in a high-level philosophy and psychology curriculum?
Because McKee's rules for creating dramatic tension on a screen perfectly map onto phenomenology, how we actually experience the world in real life. McKee focuses on something he calls the gap between expectation and result.
How does that work?
In a script, a character takes an action. They expect the world to react in a specific way based on their internal narrative. But the world pushes back. Reality delivers something entirely different than expected.
And that creates the gap.
Yes, that friction creates a gap. And that gap forces the character to scramble, adapt, and make a new choice, which reveals who they truly are.
Okay, I have a perfect example of this. Have you ever been in the shower furiously scripting out an argument you were going to have with your boss later that day?
Oh, everyone has done this. You're playing both parts in your head.
Right. You know exactly what your opening line will be. You know exactly what snarky thing they will say back, and you have the perfect, devastating comeback loaded in the chamber. You have the entire scene written.
You're ready to go.
So you march into the office, you sit down, you deliver your opening line with perfect dramatic timing, and your boss just looks at you and bursts into tears because their dog just died.
The script instantly shatters.
Completely shatters. The expectation gap rips wide open. Your comeback is now totally useless, and you are standing there in the gap.
What is fascinating here is that McKee argues, and the phenomenologists in the curriculum agree, that true character is only revealed in that exact gap. True character isn't the script you wrote in the shower. True character is the unscripted choice you make under pressure when your narrative fails.
Wow.
Do you awkwardly back out of the room? Do you offer comfort? You have to form a brand new narrative on the spot.
So how do we actually form that narrative? When our script breaks or when something random happens, how do we weave it back into a story that makes sense?
This is where the philosopher Paul Ricoeur comes in, with his concept of implotment or mimesis.
Implotment.
Yes. Ricoeur points out a fundamental truth about human consciousness. We do not experience time just chronologically as one random isolated second ticking after another. If we did, life would be incomprehensible noise. Instead, we retroactively connect events so they feel necessary to a plot. We implot them.
It's like how a totally random encounter becomes destiny in hindsight. You are rushing to work, you trip, and you spill your coffee all over a stranger's shirt.
A total disaster.
At the time, chronologically, it is just a stressful, embarrassing mess. But if you end up dating that person, 5 years later you look back and say, that spilled coffee was the magical beginning of our beautiful relationship. It was fate.
Right.
The event didn't change, but your narrative identity imploded it. You stitched it together so it made sense.
Exactly. We weave the past to justify the present. But Ricoeur is very clear on a warning here, which echoes the critique of the hero's journey. This raises a vital question about control. You are not the sole author of your life.
We desperately want to be, though. We want to be the sole writer, director, and star.
We do, but it is an illusion. Your parents wrote your opening chapters before you could speak. The cultural institutions you grew up in dictated the genre of your story. Today, algorithms dictate what information enters your plot.
We're surrounded by other authors.
Your friends, your partners, your enemies, they are all co-authors, constantly editing your story, scratching out your lines, forcing you into gaps. Your narrative identity is socially distributed. You are a co-writer at best.
Okay, let's take all of this. The fact that we are walking around plotting our lives like movies, trying to cast people in our shadow projections, imploding random events into a cohesive story. And let's bring it all the way back to the scenario we started the show with.
The coffee shop.
You are in the coffee shop, heartbroken, and the perfect breakup song comes on. If we are constantly trying to write a script, what happens when reality actually seems to read our script and play along?
Did the universe orchestrate the song? To answer this, we move to the final piece of the 2026 curriculum. Reality is correspondence. The working thesis here is incredibly nuanced and it bridges everything we've talked about.
What's the thesis?
The thesis is, the world does respond to us. It does correspond to our internal situations, but it is never only ours.
To understand this without sounding like we are wearing tinfoil hats, we have to avoid what the curriculum calls the great fallacy. We have to cleanly separate human experience into 4 domains. If you mix these domains up, you end up thinking you are a literal wizard controlling the universe with your mind.
The curriculum establishes a strict epistemic contract. It states that a truth in one domain cannot automatically be used as scientific or logical proof in another domain.
Let's walk through these domains using our coffee shop scenario.
First is domain 1, phenomenology. This is how the world appears to you. It is the raw, first-person experience. In the coffee shop, the phenomenological truth is that you feel heartbroken, the rain feels cold, and the song feels devastatingly relevant.
It is a fundamental truth that you experience the world from this situated perspective. No one can tell you it doesn't feel that way.
Domain 2 is psychology. This moves from the feeling to the mechanism. These are the cognitive functions like memory, attention, and salience that make you notice certain things and ignore others based on your current emotional state. Your brain is a filtering machine.
Domain 3 is hermeneutics and social theory.
This looks at how your interpretations and actions actually change the external environment and other people's reactions. It's the realm of self-fulfilling prophecies, social feedback loops, and how meaning is created between people.
And finally, domain 4 is metaphysics.
This is the objective, fundamental nature of reality entirely outside of human perception. Does the cosmos have an intention? Is the universe a conscious entity that plans events? Does fate exist as a physical force?
So here is the danger, the great fallacy. Just because the song has deep, profound meaning for you, which is domain 3 hermeneutics, and just because you clearly notice the lyrics because you were in a vulnerable emotional mood, which is domain 2 psychology,
Right.
That absolutely does not mean the cosmos orchestrated the barista, the weather, and the Spotify algorithm specifically to send you a message, which would be a massive claim in domain 4 metaphysics, meaning does not equal cosmic causation.
Exactly. Mixing up psychology and metaphysics is the root of magical thinking. But, and this is a massive but in the curriculum, just because the cosmos didn't orchestrate it doesn't mean the correspondence is fake.
Oh, really?
A phenomenological correspondence principle explains how reality does genuinely answer us, but without resorting to magic. It does so through 3 observable mechanisms. First is situated appearance and effective salience.
Let's use the classic car buying analogy for this. You decide after months of research that you're going to buy a blue Honda Civic.
Okay.
Suddenly, tomorrow, everywhere you look, on every highway, in every parking lot, you see blue Honda Civics. Did the universe magically spawn thousands of blue Honda Civics overnight just to validate your choice?
No, obviously not. The cars were always there. What changed was your brain's reticular activating system. Your psychology changed what was salient or important to you.
It filtered them in.
Your internal project wanting the car dictated what became visible in the external world. The world corresponded to you not by changing its physical makeup, but by aligning with your filters. In the coffee shop, your heartbreak turned your brain into a homing beacon for sad lyrics. You probably ignored 3 happy pop songs before the sad one played.
That is so true. The second mechanism is even deeper. It's called relational affordances, a concept developed by the ecological psychologist J.J. Gibson. An affordance is a possibility for action that exists in the relationship between the environment and the organism.
Think of a large, ancient oak tree in a park. If you ask 10 people what that tree is, you will get 10 different answers based on their affordances.
So?
To a lumberjack carrying an axe, that tree affords harvesting. It looks like timber, board feet, and profit. To a 7-year-old child, the tree affords climbing. It looks like a jungle gym. To a hiker caught in a sudden downpour, it affords shelter.
So the tree doesn't have one single objective meaning. The environment offers different reality responses based on your specific body, your skills, and your current needs. Reality bends to meet you based on what you are capable of doing.
Yes. And the third mechanism moves from the individual to the collective. It is from the anthropologist Tim Ingold, and he calls it the meshwork.
I love this concept.
Ingold argues that we have a terrible habit of thinking of humans and objects as closed, static spheres bouncing off each other like billiard balls on a table.
Which is how we usually picture it.
Right. He says we need to stop thinking of ourselves as dots and start thinking of ourselves as lines. We are lifelines in continuous motion. You, the other people in the coffee shop, the barista, the music algorithm, the weather system, you are all lines of movement, constantly weaving together, bending, crossing, and responding to each other. We co-respond in a shared rhythm. That shared weaving is true correspondence.
Okay, I hear all the science, I hear the psychology, the affordances, the meshwork. But let me push back for a second. Because if I am hearing you right, it sounds like you are saying that Carl Jung's famous idea of synchronicity is just an illusion.
Synchronicity.
Jung defines synchronicity as a meaningful coincidence, where your inner state and the outer world align perfectly without any physical cause. Are you saying synchronicity is just confirmation bias, just a mix of psychological filtering and emotional salience? Because that feels a bit cynical.
I want to answer that very carefully because the curriculum handles this delicately. It does not mean the meaning isn't real. If that song in the coffee shop gives you the exact emotional closure you needed to move on from your breakup, that meaning is incredibly vital. It is phenomenologically real. It might change the entire trajectory of your life.
So the impact is real.
Yes. However, if you make the strong metaphysical claim, if you claim that the universe literally arranged for that barista to cue that specific song at the exact millisecond you walked in, violating the laws of physics just to teach you a lesson about your ex, that claim lacks scientific evidence, it is completely unfalsifiable.
Right, you can't prove that.
What the curriculum argues is that the meaning is real, but the cosmic orchestration is not required for the meaning to exist. The meshwork of reality is rich enough to provide profound meaning without needing a wizard behind the curtain.
And here is where this entire discussion gets incredibly urgent and honestly a little bit dangerous. Why does it actually matter if we think the universe is a customized movie set just for us? If someone wants to believe the universe sent them a song, why can't we just let them believe it? Why be a killjoy?
Because, as the curriculum points out, it matters ethically.
It matters deeply because of ethics. This brings us to the concept of alterity and the extreme ethical dangers of modern manifestation culture and solipsism.
Yes, there is a very dark, toxic side to the popular idea that the universe is just a mirror reflecting your inner state.
Because if you truly believe that your internal thoughts, your vibes, and your narratives strictly dictate your external reality, what happens when something terrible happens? What happens when you get diagnosed with a terminal illness, or you face systemic, crushing poverty? Or you are the victim of a random violent crime?
If you apply the universe as a mirror logic consistently, you end up with what the curriculum calls narrative imperialism and severe victim blaming. If everything is just a mirror of your mind, then by that logic, you must have manifested your own cancer. You must have vibrated at a low frequency to attract poverty. You must have secretly desired the crime.
It is horrific. It completely erases structural power, biology, economics, and just plain random chance.
It leads straight to solipsism, the philosophical belief that only your mind truly exists and everyone else and everything else is just a prop in your personal play. It reduces other human beings to mere reflections of your own psychological state.
To combat this toxicity, the curriculum introduces the importance of alterity, drawing heavily on philosophers like Emmanuel Levinas and Martin Buber.
Alterity is the irreducible otherness of the world and other people. It is the recognition that the world is not you.
Levinas and Buber were adamant that true human interaction requires recognizing that the other is infinite and separate.
They are not a projection of your Jungian shadow. They are not a side character placed there to help you on your hero's journey.
Buber called this the I-thou relationship, where you meet someone as an independent, fully realized being. The opposite is an I-it relationship, where you just use them as an object to further your own narrative.
It's exactly like playing a game of chess.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
If you only ever play chess against yourself, you will never, ever be surprised. You know exactly what the opponent is going to do because the opponent is just your own mind. It is incredibly boring. To actually play the game, to actually experience reality, the opponent has to make moves you didn't see coming. They have to have their own mind.
A robust philosophy of reality, a true, healthy, lived narratology, has to give the world the right to say no.
Yes, absolutely.
It has to give the physical world and other people the right to contradict you, to surprise you, and to fiercely resist your interpretations. Sometimes a real response from the universe isn't a magical synchronic sign. Sometimes the response is a hard refusal, a harsh correction, or just complete indifferent silence.
The world's resistance is exactly what makes it real rather than a hallucination.
Precisely. If the world never pushes back, you are just dreaming. So let's pull all of this together and recap the incredible journey we have been on today.
It's been a ride.
We started by looking at the very grammar of reality, moving from the ancient Greek and Buddhist debates over whether reality is a fixed bucket of Lego bricks or a flowing, empty process of relations. We climbed agonizingly out of Plato's cave to find objective truth.
And then we dove deep inward with Descartes, hiding in a stove-heated room from an evil demon to find subjective doubt.
From there, we explored how we use that subjective starting point to script our lives. We looked at how we wear Jung's masks and project our shadows, and how we use McKee's screenwriting expectation gaps to build our narrative identities in real time.
And finally, we learned that while the world absolutely corresponds to us, through our psychological filters, our physical affordances, and our emotional salience, it retains its own beautiful, resistant independence. The universe is a meshwork of lifelines, not a mirror for our egos.
And this raises one final, highly provocative question. It isn't directly answered in our sources, but it builds entirely upon the logic we've discussed today.
This is the AI question. Right?
Yeah. We have established that humans fundamentally map and understand reality using narrative scripts. We rely on biological affordances, emotional salience, and the terrifying vulnerability of time and death to make things meaningful. Our ontology is fundamentally tied to our messy humanity.
Right. We only understand a bowling ball because it can break our toe and ruin our weekend.
But consider the current explosive rise of artificial intelligence. Here we have entities that process vast, unimaginable amounts of information. They interpret language games. They can generate complex narratives and scripts.
But they do all of this without biology.
Exactly. They do not have a lived body, what Merleau-Ponty called le corps propre. They do not experience the threat of death. They do not feel the physical pressure of a ticking clock. They have no biological vulnerability.
They can't drop a bowling ball on their toe.
They can't. So will an AI ever have a fundamental ontology if it doesn't have a fragile ego to protect, a shadow to repress, or a biological lifespan to panic over? Can it ever truly participate in lived narratology?
Or will a superintelligent AI look at our entirely story-driven, emotionally salient, dramatic reality as just a bizarre, irrational human illusion.
Wow. If reality is a lived situation that requires vulnerability, what happens when the observer processing reality cannot be hurt? That is a profound question to chew on.
It really is.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As you step out into your own meshwork today, whether you are heading back into a coffee shop, going to work, or just walking down the street in the rain, pay attention to what pushes back. See what happens when the universe doesn't play the song you expected. Because that friction, that resistance, that is how you know you are actually alive.
Nexus Social Hub Podcast.